We'll move on now to item number 6, conduct of business. City Clerk.
Item 6A, receive oral report on the storm drainage and flood protection fee election and provide direction to staff regarding next steps.
City Manager.
Back again by popular demand. Javon Grogan, City Manager. I will provide a brief presentation to the City Council with regard to our storm drainage and flood protection fee election and next steps. The City Council and the community will remember that on June 22nd of this year, the City Council took an action where you adopted a resolution declaring the results of the election that closed on June 15th of this year for the mail-in election connected to the proposed storm drainage and flood protection fee and abandoning proceedings because the measure did not pass. At that meeting, the City Council had some discussions about what the next steps would be, and I committed to coming back to you in an expeditious fashion to have that conversation. And so that's why we're here tonight, less than a month later. So let's try to work through our technical issues that we have seemed to be having all night. Okay. Objective, to receive an oral report, as the City Clerk said, with regard to the fee and provide direction to staff. Our agenda tonight really has 4 items. One is acknowledgement and thank you. We'll overview the initiative. We'll talk about the election results, and then we'll get on to the core part of the discussion, which is options and next steps moving forward. Thank you, simply. You know, we really just want to take this moment to thank the San Bruno community for engaging with us on this process, a process that was a 1.5-year effort to articulate and educate the community of our stormwater challenges and the fact that the current fees have been in place for nearly 30 years, 27 years to be in effect, and are no longer covering their cost. And we had a robust public communication effort and outreach effort, and the entire process really culminated with following the state prescribed what we commonly refer to as a Proposition 218 process for mail-in ballots. And so it was a process that the city of San Bruno and many of our residents were unused to, because it was not like a typical registered voter election. It was a required mail-in ballot to property owners. And so we eventually mailed out over 12,500 ballots and received back 5,226 ballots. You may be saying, well, that's not a lot, but it's actually 42% for these off-cycle mail-in ballot elections is par. And so it's around what we expected, 40%. And we also confirmed with our consultant, Will Dan, that ran the election, is that for a response rate of 40% for a mail-in ballot off-cycle only to property owners is about right. And so as a part of our robust outreach, the council knows that we met with community groups and went on a bit of a roadshow. So a little bit of the initiative. It is a part of the city's overall comprehensive fiscal sustainability project. As we all know, the city of San Bruno has been improving its fiscal footing, and this effort is critically important to that financial footing, as we'll see in a slide or two. But our fiscal sustainability project really has a couple key components underpinning it. It is expenditure reductions, growing our revenue, pursuing economic development, and prudent budget management. And I won't go through the litany of accomplishments that we've had with that because we've had sort of long presentations of that. But this effort was critical to that. And it was critical to that because our stormwater system is aging. Many of our pipes are over 100 years old. And just in the last 24 months, we've spent over $1.2 million on infrastructure that has failed that we had a liability to protect. The most significant one cost nearly $1 million itself, and that's when we had a stormwater culvert that eventually eroded part of the hillside near San Bruno Avenue across from the Lunardi's grocery store and threatened the integrity of San Bruno Avenue. And so we had to declare an emergency and respond quickly to that. And so we know the importance of maintaining our infrastructure. And the city undertook an effort back in 2017 to do a stormwater master plan that identified more than $30 million of improvements. And we have yet to be able to embark on those improvements. And we know every year that passes, when we don't make those improvements, the infrastructure gets worse and the cost to eventually make those improvements is greater. And so we launched this effort back in September 2020. We've followed the mail-in ballot procedures that began in March of 21, and then the election ended in June of 2015. This slide is sadly all too familiar to the City Council because we've had a lot of discussions about this slide during our budget conversations, and it's the precipitous decline of our stormwater enterprise fund. Now that essentially for funding, we continue to be at the status quo, which is the revenue does not cover operating, nor does it cover the $30 million of needed capital improvements. And so the general fund has to become the backstop. And we know that will come at the cost of services and programs. And so the City Council did identify funding for the $1 million deficit in the current budget year using one-time revenue from the federal government in our ARPA funds. However, we have to fix this problem. And so what's shown in this graph is the fund balance in blue was mildly positive last fiscal year and projected to be negative if the status quo continues, which is the fees are set at a 1994 level. And so the other chart is from our budget process as well that shows the proposed budget that had a beginning fund balance of $312,000. And this municipal or Prop 218 election ended right in the middle of our council deliberations. And so this is not the adopted budget, but this is the budget where we had a $1 million deficit. And again, the current revenue, as you can see, is just over $659,000. 1994 figures where the most of the properties in the city of San Bruno pay $46 a year to fund the stormwater enterprise, but our operating costs alone are $1.5 million. And so that leaves a deficit of $875,000. And our capital cost this year alone was $476,000, and that's frankly only because we can't afford to do the needed work. And a large majority of that was for our required grant match, because we did receive a grant to do work on our stormwater system in Spyglass, but that grant comes with the requirement to pay 10%. And so we had to identify local funds to do that. So what remains unfunded are our collection boxes, various improvements throughout the city. We have a regional stormwater capture project that is near the Caltrans right-of-way at I-280 and I-380, and trash capture devices throughout the city to stop trash from entering into our stormwater system and then eventually being deposited into the bay. And so the election results are shown. The election concluded at 5 p.m. on June 15th. The ballots, a public counting of the ballots began in this room the very next day on June 16th. And that was available online for remote viewing and in-person attendance. We did have members of the public come and watch the ballot counting, as well as we live streamed the ballot counting on Zoom all day. And so the results are as shown: 1,833 yes votes, 3,310 no votes, 83 ballots were rejected. And so I won't go through all the data, but we did want to provide for the public and the council again the reasons for why some ballots were rejected, some were missing a signature, others the yes or no was not marked clearly, and we had a few duplicative ballots. And approximately 220 were returned to sender back to the city from the post office. And so what are our next steps is the core question that the city council and certainly we know that the public wants. And so we know that continuing the status quo is not acceptable. What that means is that our system will continue to flood during heavy rains and cause property damage and risk public safety. We understand and we recognize that property owners did not wish to say yes to the measure and pay the additional costs. But we also know that both property owners and residents want, expect, and deserve to have their public infrastructure maintained. And we're committed to continuing to find a solution, and absolutely the council is. And so, frankly, we're committed to redouble our efforts. And this was a strategic initiative. It is a strategic initiative. It is not closed out, and we shall continue. As far as options, wanted to articulate 5, and we have a 6th other there because there are certainly others that can be considered. But the options that we wanted to talk to the city council about are on the screen, and we'll go through them now. First off is to initiate an analysis of the election results. And this would entail working with Wildan, who counted the ballots for us, and engage with them to conduct a demographic analysis of the ballot responses. We really want to seek information on, are there patterns of how property is voted by type? Are there patterns by neighborhood, or if the assessment amount can provide us some sort of fact-based information on trends. And really we want to do this and look to identify funding for this. We would need to work with the city council to have approval for funding if this effort is currently not funded. And we would align any future poll or survey to one of the future efforts as discussed in the other 4 options. And so option 2 is to return to the voters with a further or additional articulation of the need. I think we can engage on a second Prop 218 process with the results of the election coming out as there were, nearly 2 to 1, not in favor. Not sure that additional articulation would be helpful. Certainly we can seek to do a more robust job at articulating the need. It is also important to note that the city is barred from campaigning or asking members of the public to vote yes. We can only articulate the need and provide fact-based information. But one option that is certainly available to the city is to sort of redo the public education effort and relaunch the state 218 process again. A third option is consider a general obligation bond or a parcel tax. This effort would be focused primarily on funding the master plan projects. That is that $30+ million worth of projects that was identified in the city's 2017 master plan. And essentially what this would do is that it would bifurcate the problem and attempt to solve a portion of it. The storm drainage and flood protection fee was aimed at solving, if you will, the complete issue, both the issue to have enough funds to cover the operations and maintenance of the system, and also recovering enough funds to complete the needed projects so that we can, over time, do that $30 million worth of projects. If we undertake a general obligation bond or a parcel tax, we can really focus in on simply doing the projects and look for other ways to fund the operating costs. And if we look toward funding the projects, the bonds will automatically have a sunset date when they are repaid, and that may address some concerns that we heard from property owners. In addition, a general obligation bond and a parcel tax will be a election in a different venue. It will be a registered voter election, and timing that on election cycles that have a high turnout may also be something that the city council wants to consider, whereas the storm drain and flood protection fee by law was only limited to property owners, not limited, not registered voters. Option 4 is consider a special stormwater approved tax initiative. This could likely be timed for the November 22 or November 24 election. We could do a special election, but as we saw with the update that we received at earlier tonight's meeting, a special election, the cost is approximately $500,000, so $500,000. So we would likely want to time any voter approved initiative, whether in option 3 or option 4, to when there is a regularly scheduled election. That will require a 2/3 approval, as will number 3, depending on how it's structured. But that is an option, is to go forward with a tax measure. The 5th option is to participate in a possible future regional effort. As I know the city council knows, there has been a new countywide flood control and sea level rise resiliency agency that has been established, and there are conversations about having a countywide measure to look at stormwater and other items. Since the June 15th date, we have received inquiries from the county and other cities because we are not alone in having a challenge with funding our stormwater system. And so there may be in the future a region-wide effort to look at stormwater. The challenge with region-wide efforts and our other regional revenue sources, typically they are structured as the revenue from the county is pulled together and given in strategic grants for specific projects. And so we may not be able to look toward a regional effort to fund the full complement of our infrastructure, because with typical regional revenue measures, a city does not receive the money that's collected in their jurisdiction. Those funds are then pooled and given for strategic grants. And 6 is other. We may very well identify other efforts, and we didn't want to close off any possibilities for that or present the 5 that we've talked about as the only options. And so as far as the staff recommendation, we really are recommending 3, which is to proceed with the analysis of the prior election effort, forestall any poll or survey, and align that to a subsequent effort. And the one that we would be recommending is to begin looking into, not to commit, but begin looking into a general obligation bond or a parcel tax, and really focus that initiative on accomplishing the capital improvement projects, those projects that we know about, those projects that have been identified because the infrastructure is aging and in need of replacement. And the longer we wait to do them, the more expensive they become. That if aligned with a bond or aligned to those projects, would have a sunset. And then the 5th item, which is to continue to have conversations with the county and other agencies within the county. And if there is an effort for a regional-wide stormwater project, to certainly participate in that, because we have one region-wide project now. That's our stormwater capture project near I-380 and 280. It is within the city of San Bruno, but will benefit the region because it is a groundwater injection project and will reduce the flow that goes into the bay. And so that concludes the presentation and our recommendations, and open for any questions and discussions the city council may have. I will take this slide down for now, but if council would like me to call it back up, we're happy to do so.
Thank you. We received the oral report on the storm drainage. Staff is looking for us to provide direction regarding next steps. So now is the time for your comments, and Suggestions for next steps, please. Colleagues? Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, thank you for that report. There was a slide that I did not see that was also requested, which was the top 20 landowners in San Bruno and how they voted. I was just wondering if we would be getting that at a different time.
Sure, Councilmember Mason, yes, at the prior meeting on June 22nd, you did ask that should the city conduct analysis that we look at the largest property owners and have they voted. At this point, the city in the last 3 weeks have not embarked on that effort. We can look at that through the demographic analysis and look at the type, when we say look at the type of property owners in that first bullet under number 1, size is one of the factors that we will look into, and that can also be attained through the assessment amount data. But that work needs to be conducted and funded. But in the last 3 weeks, we have not begun that work, and that is one of the recommendations to begin that work.
Okay, and how much time, I guess, would it take? Because I would imagine that between the 1833 votes yes and 3310 votes no, there must have been a reporting mechanism. I mean, how is that all kept? How's that stored?
Councilmember Mason, all the ballots are stored. The city staff have not gone through the ballots to identify who voted and how they voted. The ballots were counted in this room with members of the public and members of the public, both present and at home. All 5,000 plus ballots that were received were gone through and sorted in yes or no. In order to undertake the analysis to see any demographic trends, we really need to embark on that work, and we have not done that. At this point, do not have a scope of work for the vendor that we would look to do that, nor do I know how much that work would cost. What I am bringing forward to the City Council at your request is recommendations and a plan for next steps. That is one of the next steps, and should the City Council agree to embark on that analysis, we will certainly do that and work to obtain a full scope of work and a timetable. In the last 3 weeks, that work has not been done. It's not funded. We are simply having the conversation to talk about next steps right now.
Okay, so I don't want to belabor the point, but I don't know why we need a consultant to identify the top 20 landowners and how they voted. But I would just leave it at that. It should be fairly easy to identify that information without demographics. We don't need to know more information, but we were told that it was public record. So who are they and how did they vote? I wanted to ask also around, I think that there's questions that have been kind of not maybe clearly communicated around the public and how the public's reaction has been around the stormwater. And so the areas that I have largely heard have been around why such a significant increase, and could it be phased in higher quantities within more of like a 5-year phase-in, 5-year, 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 et cetera. Why there were no exemptions for seniors who are on fixed income, of which San Bruno has a pretty large number of seniors. Why there was no sunset. On a more honesty around the messaging and some of the pictures, I guess I have been told that were in the flyers, and whether these were areas that could have been maintained better, as opposed to making saying that it's an emergency. It is an emergency, but how long had the city known about some of these areas? And then I think the other area that is really kind of difficult as a council member to respond to is why the city is prioritizing requesting these funds of the residents when we still haven't initiated the short-term rentals the charter city transfer tax for commercial buildings, and the cannabis tax. And so I say this only because, again, I don't know what a consultant would cost. I don't know if that's part of what we're approving tonight. It's not exactly clear. But what I do want to say is I think these are very common, and these are what I have been told a number of times. And I think unless we're able to come up with responses that are diligent, that are honest, it's going to be difficult to overcome the amount of no's that we got. And this isn't a city that has traditionally supported the measures that the city of San Bruno has brought forth to them. So I do just want to state that I appreciate all the work staff did. I know that we saved a lot of money on consultants in moving this forward. But I do want to take a step back and just be very clear that I don't think it's a big surprise what the areas of concern were. And I think we've got to be honest with ourselves about that and figure out how do we address them and move forward. Thank you.
Next would be Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Medina, and thank you, staff, for this report. For me, getting some data analysis is first, and it's my understanding what our city manager is requesting for us to proceed with him to return back with that scope that would detail the costs associated to do that study. So I'm in favor of hearing what that cost would be, and until we get the cost, it's kind of hard to move off of that point. I think there was a bunch of uncertainty in this election, and COVID made it much more difficult. And I'm hoping that at some point our residents we need our residents to get behind this. We can't continue operating with hundreds of thousands of dollars that are going to be coming out of our general fund, and our infrastructure continues to age. We're a 100-year city. The backbone of our stormwater system is old, and we need to fix it. And if we don't have the funds to fix it, then we're going to have to take that out of our general fund. Our city manager calls that a backstop, and it's a different way of wording it, but the money has to come out of somewhere. So to get to the point of where we're going to go now, I'm first ready to request that the data be generated, and then we need to look at next steps from there is to educate our public on the different scenarios to pay for it, and to see how comfortable our residents will be. This is a very long, expensive problem that hasn't been addressed, and we need to take care of it. So that's where I'm at currently, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Hamilton.
So I am also in favor of actually all three of the staff's recommendations here regarding the analysis. What I was hearing, just to clarify the discussion from Councilmember Mason regarding the analysis, what I was hearing was that on election day, the ballots went through and they were put into, this is a yes, this is a no, this is a yes, this is a yes, this is a no, into those piles, but what was not done was, this is a yes, and this is the parcel number and the name for that one. And that level did not happen on election day, which I can probably understand given that it was a public, open process. So, which is why, my understanding is that all the ballots are going to need to be gone through again to get that level of detail so that analysis can be done. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilmember Hamilton. Just to expound on that, I think it would have been inappropriate for us to read off every ballot and how each individual property owner voted. And so we can undertake an analysis of the demographics and trends. We would return that information without revealing individual votes. And it would be aggregated based on trends, based on the demographics of individual properties. But we would still seek not to identify how individuals voted. I think we heard that as a concern from some members of our community that were unfamiliar with a required property owner election. And so I think we would need to maintain that with the analysis that's conducted.
Okay, thank you. So I am in favor of doing the analysis, but also, of course, would want to know what it's going to cost before we embark on it. And I know that's the process we will follow. I am in favor of considering a general obligation bond or partial tax, exploring that, and focusing on the capital projects, and also seeing what we can do regionally and partnering. Just general comments in the post-mortem from all of this. I also had some concerns about the messaging. I felt that the messaging that was done all focused on was all okay, but I don't think it focused on everything that it needed to focus on. And I think that I spoke to many residents as part of this process, trying to convince them to vote yes. And I didn't end up using any of the arguments that were in any of the literature. The primary two arguments that I used with folks were around the fact that the rate had not been raised since 1994. And the analogy that I use with folks is you go down to Grand Leader and try to buy a sandwich from Mike and give him $4 for that sandwich because that's what you paid in 1994. You're not going to walk out of there with a sandwich. And that seemed to resonate with folks because it's just basic math. But what people were really the most upset about was, how did we get here? How did we get to this point where we're so far out of whack? It's been so long since it's been touched. And they just wanted to hear an acknowledgement that, yeah, that was a miss. That was a miss. It should have been addressed sooner. But regardless, we are where we are. So I was able to convince a few people from no to yes, but not nearly enough, clearly. But using those arguments, and I just want us to, think hard about the messaging for next time if we need to go back. If we're going to be going back to the voters. I just think we need to be a little bit more open about how we got to where we are, and acknowledging that we are where we are and what we need to do to get out of it. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Sal.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I wanted to follow up on a couple of Councilmember Mason's comments. One specifically, so regarding the ability to provide senior discounts on something that we place on a property tax. Is that an option for us? Because I think that would definitely be a benefit to the community if that's possible.
I would ask that the city attorney come on. I know we've talked about this before, but let's let the city attorney provide the answer.
Well, I wish I could. Mr. Salazar and members of the City Council, I don't know the answer to that without doing some research. So we'll take a look at that and come back with you about that. I apologize. I just don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then also in terms of other revenue sources, because I heard similar concerns from residents about, the city should be doing everything it can to collect all the revenue that it can before going back to the voters. So in terms of that, so all the other things that I believe that are on our horizon right now are general fund type taxes. And so I wanted to get an idea, is an increase in our general fund really going to get us where we need to be with storm drain, or does storm drain truly need a dedicated funding source that's only going to benefit, just like we do with water and sewer. So I wanted to get a better idea about that because I think that also strengthens the argument around why we would want to go back out and do anything other than just focus on general fund.
Councilmember Salazar, our stormwater system is an enterprise. Enterprises typically rely on the revenue that comes to that enterprise to fund its operations and the capital expenditures related to that enterprise. Our fee has not been increased in nearly 30 years. So the revenue no longer captures the cost. Many of those expenditures have to occur. We have to maintain the system we have. We have infrastructure that's needed. If we can't afford it, we apply for grants. When we get a grant, we have to pay for the grant match. That happened this year. We have an option to say, you know what, we're not going to apply for grants because we don't even have the money for the grant match. We're not making that option. We apply for the grants and we needed to find a way to fund the grant match. That can be a general fund obligation. The general fund can pick that up. What that comes with is pushing off other needed general fund programs and services and other capital improvements. And so most agencies would look at an enterprise like stormwater and try to solve that with recovering additional money for that enterprise. And if that is not an option, we still have mandated costs. And so the general fund will have to pay for those costs. And that is just going to come with a trade-off. You know, unfortunately, San Bruno has been an under-resourced city for quite some time, and we have to make very tough challenges every year with what we fund and what we don't fund. And you know, candidly, at the end of this month, it'll be 3 years that I've been the city manager here. This has been a 1.5 year effort. The fee hasn't been increased for 27 years. When I launched the fiscal sustainability project, it was keenly important to me that we do something about stormwater, that we take a swing. And you know what? It didn't pass. When we launched that effort, no one wanted to talk about it. Not staff, not members in the community. And it was an effort that I pushed as the city manager of this organization because I felt that it was critically important to the financial health because it hadn't been done. And the revenue was constantly being eroded by the cost. And so, as I said on June 22nd, it was a Hail Mary pass because we had waited to the very last moment as an organization and as a city to address this to the point to where in this current budget year, the fund is negative. And so thankfully, we were able to use federal dollars to cover 1 year of that $1 million deficit. We still have a problem. We've had a problem for more than a decade. And we're committed to continuing to work through a solution. We're committed to debriefing the effort. We're committed to re-articulating. What I will say candidly is that I do not think this organization was not transparent or that this organization cherry-picked images. This is infrastructure that we are not saying if you don't maintain it, something may happen. Something has happened. We have spent over $1.5 million in the last 24 months because infrastructure failed because we did not maintain it. And that's a reality. And so we're committed to doing everything we can to continue to debrief the effort, to launch a new effort. But I do take issue with the organization not being transparent. We can absolutely improve. We can absolutely re-articulate. But I do believe the organization did transparently articulate the challenge, and absolutely going forward, we will adjust.
Well, thank you for that, City Manager. And I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. And I can say that transparency goes back years, and we've had these conversations. We started these conversations long back when we first decided to increase the water and sewer rates. And I remember back then naively asking why we didn't put our sewer rates on the tax bill, on the property tax bill. And I was cautioned then that it would be far more difficult to get an increase if we were to go that direction. So I agree with you that we have always been transparent. We knew this was coming. We chose to focus on the other two enterprises. And I think that we have made huge strides in both of those. This was one that we knew would be difficult. I think that our predictions were validated with these results. I know I was one of the voices that asked for the postmortem on this. I'm a little less confident that there's any value left there unless we're absolutely going to go back out for a similar effort. And given the results, I don't know that they would be dramatically different. I do agree with Councilmember Hamilton that perhaps the facts that were stated in the literature didn't hit the point. And I think I would be more concerned in revisiting what what we were trying to do there and what the message would be, rather than really trying to analyze the demographics of the votes that came in. I think with as few ballots, I mean, we're talking about 5,000 total ballots, 1,800 of those being yeses. I don't know that we'd be able to pull anything that's statistically significant out of those few numbers of data points to really help us re-strategize how we would go back out. And at the end of the day, we really need to convince the majority of our residents that this truly is necessary and it's important, and that just finding other revenue sources, other generic revenue sources for the general fund will not necessarily help us in this effort. So I think if the majority of the council does want to see some analysis around that, I'd like to see the price tag on that before committing. But I'm feeling that there's less value in that than I initially thought there might be. So I wouldn't push heavily on that, and maybe we start looking at doing a different type of tax measure. And then finally, just in terms of looking at other alternatives, is there a reason why we couldn't do a storm fee that's similar to our sewer fee, where it's tied to the sort of billed as a service rather than as something that has to be placed on the tax roll? I think there's reasons why we can't, but I just wanted to throw that out there and get a refresher on that.
Yeah. So we'll look into that, and we'll have the city attorney research that question.
All right. Thank you.
Let's go back to Councilmember Mason.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that when I use the word honest with the residents, I want to just kind of be clear that an example is in one of the flyers, it was that emergency on San Bruno Avenue. And we had a number of meetings about it. It was quite expensive to fix. And I received an email from a resident with an email attached to it stating that what happened was going to happen about 7 or 8 years ago. And so when I talk about just being, straightforward with our residents, it's, saying that these are things that we've known about, but they've been deferred. And luckily nobody was hurt, nobody was injured. But I think at the end of the day, my conversations with a number of residents were ultimately that we need to invest in our stormwater. It does need to be a dedicated fund. I think the issue that I heard over and over was that there were all these other questions that were not answered. And I think at one point or another, they were answered for us. I know I've posted some of the videos where questions were answered specifically around stormwater. But I think in the same way that the city invested in, I believe it was 4 mailings, one of those mailings could have been an FAQ where we actually go question by question that we've been asked as council members and just go ahead and respond to them. Because my feeling, and I can't speak for all the council members, but is that the city does need to invest in its infrastructure. And we have made huge efforts in getting funding, but based on our budget season this year, it's clear that most of our funding sources, even those increases, are already allotted to other needs, also some of which are infrastructure. And I think we need to be very clear about our needs and kind of how far we've come and how far we still need to go, because we're really just leveling the bar right now. We really didn't have any money a year ago. And not that we have a whole lot more money now, but I think that there have been a lot of efforts made to generate revenue. And the three areas I just mentioned, short-term rental, charter city transfer tax, and cannabis tax, were responded to during our budget meeting, letting us know where the city was with each one of those. But if you miss that meeting, then you don't know what's going on, and you don't know what efforts are being taken to achieve those. And so when I talk about, responding, I do believe that the majority of these areas that I mentioned are probably some of the most common comments that all of us heard. And should we take this on again, we really should just address them head on. The other area I wanted to make sure I mentioned is the community foundation. I can't tell you how many people asked about why the community funds weren't being spent on stormwater. And that could have been probably a whole page of itself, not just informing the public about what's going on with the community foundation and how those funds are allocated, but also addressing, why those funds were being placed into the RAC as opposed to stormwater. And I've responded to many residents around, the process on how the RAC was, determined by the residents, et cetera. But I really am just trying to say that I think, this is something that is desperately needed in San Bruno. We are going to have more emergencies if we don't invest in it. But I do think it's really important that as a city, when we communicate with the residents, we've got to understand where the residents are coming from, and we have to make sure that our residents' questions are being answered head on. And I just want to see on my notes if I had anything else. And I would say the other area too that I heard about was also the Measure G. We approved Measure G, and we're not seeing our streets repaired overnight. And I've told a number of residents about the great presentation that we received a couple months ago from DPW about this 10-year street repair plan. And that's also an area that I think we should continue to share and communicate with our residents, because there are plans for street repair. We've talked about making that information more easily accessible, but I think it just all goes back to this idea of we have supported the city, and where's that support visually for us to see? So thank you.
So I've heard from, I think, the vice mayor and the two council members kind of about going down, for direction purposes, going down a path of maybe getting some analysis, but then I heard maybe not, but kind of like, let's see what it's going to cost, or maybe going to a bond type situation. So I don't know if Councilmember Mason spoken, but did you have any suggestions for staff or next steps, I should say?
I think for me, now that we've learned from the earlier presentation that, there's a deadline around when you've got to submit any measures, so for the recall, I think they said it was like June 15th. So if we were looking at placing this on a future ballot measure, what would that timeline look like? And then within that timeline, what would the cost be to determine whether it's something that would behoove us to budget this year or a future year. I'm just saying that because we're going to have an election in 2022. So what does that timeline look like, and what does the cost look like? Thank you.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at some point, yes, considering the recommendation number 3, but that's further down the road. I believe that the initial analysis of the results will be beneficial. When staff could look at that data, they'll have a better knowledge of where it passed and where the effort should be concentrated. For me, in hearing my colleagues' comments about talking to residents, we need to do a little bit better in educating them and perhaps looking at how the increase won't be so steep. And the option 3 there would fall, in my mind, within that, being it tonight. We're not going to solve this tonight, but we need to get ourselves on a path to deal with it. So for me, it's first the data, and then considering the recommendation 3, sure. But that's like further down the road with study sessions and making sure that the questions from our residents are answered and they're repeated, and it's referred to. Too often in our city, people may say, well, I didn't know about that. And it's like, well, here's where the information is. And in the COVID year, it was very hard to with all the distractions, to let people know how important this really is. So we can tweak it. And I look forward to many meetings on figuring out how we're going to solve this problem, because it's really serious.
Okay, so am I hearing from all my colleagues that let's just go from a number 5? I think nobody is saying not to continue in those efforts or communications. Is that correct? Is there anybody that disagrees with that statement? I'm seeing no hands, no nods of saying no, so I see that that's 5 thumbs up. Okay. This is going based on what staff was giving recommendation. On item number 1, which is initiate the analysis of the election results. Am I hearing from my colleagues that they'd like to have that looked into, get some data, and then come back with a plan that would be like, if we went down this path, it cost this, that path, it cost that? Just wanted, because I've heard a little bit about that. Yes, we want some analysis. Is that accurate? Mr. Vice Mayor, yes? Mr. Hamilton? Yes. Thank you. Mr. Hamilton?
Well, yes, but again, it's all going to depend on the cost. So yes. So yes, I want us to do analysis. If it's going to cost $1 million, then no.
Right.
So we need to get
cost
that.
Cost conscious. Mr. Salazar? And we'll go to Ms.
I'm going to say no, and unless because number 1 relates directly to number 2. So unless we're saying we definitely want to do number 2, we want to go another run at it, I don't see the value in doing number 1. So I'm very cool on 1 and 2. I would say no, and I would rather have staff focus on 3 and 4 personally.
Okay, Councilmember Mason.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, can we just get a cost proposal on if 5 is the one nobody's interested in, then when's a 4? I mean, I guess I'm a little confused. I'm trying to figure out, are we giving direction to hire a consultant, or is this being done by the analyst in-house?
Okay, well, first I was trying to get on number 5, and I felt that all 5 of us, to my knowledge, were okay with that to participate in possible future regional efforts. So I didn't hear anybody say no to that.
Oh, okay. So
are you feeling no to that? I just, because the 4 said yes, just let's clarify.
Yeah, I think I'm without knowing enough about the regional effort, I would say no to that.
Okay.
Because we're really behind, and I'm worried that,
Well, but if there's possible funding, it's like, why would you turn it down? If there's available funding that we're able to get through whatever it might be, but that's fine. So it's 4-1 to participate in possible future regional effort. That has been given direction to staff. Now we were back to the initiate the analysis. Councilmember Salazar felt that, cost conscious. I think that Councilmember Hamilton is on the same, but maybe I'm taking us off a little bit. I don't know, but let's go to Councilmember Hamilton and our city manager.
Just a really quick comment after Councilmember Salazar's comment. I don't think that the analysis, doing the analysis, only benefits us for number two. I also agree that going back and doing this whole same process again would be probably foolish and wasteful. But I do think that that understanding from a demographic perspective how people voted might yield us important information for number three, for targeting our messaging and whatnot. That's why I see it as value, not because I'm interested in going back through this the same process again. Thank you.
Can I clarify something, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Only that, when we look at the election from the number one results compared to the number three, we're not talking about the same group of people anymore, because we're talking property owners versus registered voters. So it's a completely different body of people. So making that leap from one to the other, I think would be difficult. So, I mean, some of these people, it may not be the same people at all, and they may count in different groups, where one person that owns several properties would get several votes, whereas in the other way, it's individual voters. So I think there's less opportunity to transfer that data, and that's why I'm thinking unless we do another 218, there's limited value in that data.
Thank you, Councilmember. City Manager?
Just to clarify, number one, we would develop a scope of work and bring that to the City Council for review and approval. It is my belief that we would need to utilize the services of an outside entity to do a comprehensive demographic analysis. At this point, I can't say whether those results would be solely beneficial for a similar effort, or may provide information that is beneficial for a general bond obligation. For example, if we see trends where larger assessment, if sort of anyone over X amount of assessment voted no, that may factor in the type of general obligation bond that we go out for, the series of the bond, so how much we do at any given time. We may bond for 5 million. If the data shows that to bond for 10 million, it may be a no. And so we may actually stretch out the time horizon at which we would undertake the bonds to do the work. And so if the City Council says proceed with number one, what we would do is we would identify the scope of work and we would come back to you with that scope of work and the projected costs. With regard to number three, we would need to begin work to understand the general obligation bond process and the parcel tax. While we have, it seems like a long time till November 2022, we already have direction for a number of potential initiatives that would be on the November 22 election cycle, a charter city, and a potential real estate transfer tax for commercial properties being one. We really can't do all of that work in the first 6 months of 2022 to prepare to put something on the ballot. And so should we look to proceed down with this effort, we're really going to have to put that into our work program with all of the other strategic initiatives and most importantly, ballot initiatives that we will be considering for 22. And so work would begin on this in this fiscal year. And so that's why it's up there, because we would need to identify the precise path forward. And then as we talked about, all of these have an articulation process behind them. An articulation process. We cannot, as an agency, campaign for passage, but we can articulate factual information.
Okay, you folks have heard the analysis from the City Manager. So what is your folks' thoughts on item one? Councilmember Mason.
I'm sorry, Mayor Medina. I'm just trying to figure out, is there any reason we can't go back again for another initiative with similar to this one at a future date once we have more information and done in-house? I don't know if I don't see that option here.
Councilmember Mason, that is option number 2. Return to voters.
Oh,
with
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
articulation of the need.
Okay. I'm sorry. I interpreted that as something different.
Vice Mayor.
Oh, I just wanted to express my support for getting a cost estimate for the analysis of the election. That's very important to be able to do, and it could be very cheap, or we're going to find out. We don't know how much it's going to cost, and letting the city manager get a quote isn't going to cost us anything. So I think we should just move on to do the vote on number 1 and keep on going.
I just want to make sure that city manager, we're on the same page, because I'm hearing you and I'm hearing colleagues, and I don't know that it's connected. And maybe I'm incorrect in that statement.
So with number 1, if the council says proceed, we're interested in potentially analyzing the election results, we would contact companies that do that work, develop a scope of work, and return to the city council with a estimated cost of that work. What I have not said up until this point is that we will take another look at our ability to do it in-house and what that pushes off for other work that is on the city's work program, as well as based on the scope of work, if we have the skill set to do that in-house. What I said earlier is that it's my recommendation that we would ideally use an outside firm to have a very professional, comprehensive analysis. But again, my recommendation to you will also be informed by the cost of that. Right? If that's cost prohibitive, I may say, if the council wants to do this, here's what we can do in-house with our own resources. But you're not saying do the work. You're essentially saying out of the possible options for next steps, we're interested in looking into number 1.
Okay. Thank you for clarity. So, Mr. Medina, you're on board on that. Is that correct? Yes. Mr.
Right,
Hamilton?
sir.
Yes.
Ms. Mason, thank you. Thank you for the thumbs and the voice. Ms. Mason?
I think that's fine.
Mr. Salazar?
I'm still in there.
I'll go ahead with the yes as far as that. So you have the direction there. You have direction so far. Basically, it was 4-1 on number 5, 4-1 on number 1. City manager, do you want to pause at that point, or do you still want us to go over whether it's number 2 or number 3, or what are your thoughts at this time?
If the council is interested in us adding this as to our work program to look at a possible general obligation bond or parcel tax around our other ballot initiatives that we may consider for November 22, you can do that now, or we can have those discussions later. Does the decision have to be made tonight? Absolutely not. We can schedule a study session. But what I would say is that, as the city council knows, the work program that we approved and funded, not everything on that work program will get done. And so if we are going to potentially do this, knowing sooner rather than later is important. So I can organize the work that staff has to do because this has a definite timetable to it. And it has an alignment to the other ballot items that we may be considering. And all of those potential ballot items really need to come to the city council fully baked at the same time, so you can make an informed decision on which items you would like to put on the ballot. Saying consider a geo or a parcel tax is not sort of saying you're definitely going to do that effort. And if you would like, we can sort of schedule further conversations at another time. But if staff is to begin work on it, we need the direction, and we really need to put it within the work program. And so we really can't wait. I would say longer than October for that direction. and that would really be pushing up to sort of not leaving a lot of time for us to do work in 21 on it. And I do think it's absolutely critical that we do some work in 21 on this, if it's an even remote possibility that the council wants to consider for 22.
Okay, Councilmember Salazar.
And so it was this sort of lack of concrete direction that caused me to try to put the brakes on approving the budget. And so I think it's critical, and I think it's time sensitive. And so I want to definitely make a decision to work that into the work plan. Whether it's going to be 2, 3, or 4, but I think we need to identify a path forward sooner rather than later. I'd rather not delay that because this is critical. It's a huge gap, and we definitely can't fill it from the general fund based on what we projected. So something's got to give, and so I'd like to see us start work on it soon.
Okay, Vice Mayor Medina.
I'm apprehensive on, I understand the severity and the need to do something with this. Adding another initiative to an overloaded, currently we don't know what is going to be done, what the status of everything is. We just got out of budget. So if our city manager says that we could wait a little bit, then I say we wait, and then we get an update on where we are with cannabis, where we are with Airbnb and all these other things. We can have further discussions on it. Clearly, we're going to do something, but that decision doesn't have to happen right now at this time. That's what I heard from our city manager, and I think that's what we should do.
I think you said October at the latest.
Okay, so we have some time.
Okay.
We never did prioritize our strategic initiatives, and that's something that I think we really need to do.
Okay.
That we can't do everything. Let me just finish, Mr. Mayor. Just 30 seconds more. So when stuff like this comes up where it's really important to do something, we need to be able to say, take something off, because it all won't get done. And we need to prioritize. That's what I think how every responsible household operates. You can only do what needs to be done at that time, and you can't do everything. I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Anything else from Mr. Hamilton or Mrs. Mason? Is that a no then? I'm trying to figure where the council is to answer the city manager on direction. Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, I think we, I think we need to move forward. I think we started this process. I think we need to move forward with it, especially while it is fresh and the residents have essentially responded to the initial effort. I also just want to, I guess where part of my confusion is normally when you're looking at your options, if you're going to hire an outside party, they're going to let you know what the possibilities are within each option. And I feel like we're being asked to prioritize options without really fully knowing what it is that we're prioritizing, and we may be leaving something off. So for example, the future regional effort, if you're telling me, hey, there's money available, there has been money available in the last decade, then I would, of course, want to support something where there's money available. But if you're saying that there's a possible future regional effort, nothing really is known about it right now, and San Bruno, a smaller city compared to our neighboring cities, may benefit from it. I don't know that I want more staff time to go to number 5 than some of the other options here. So I'm fine going through each one of them. I think I do find this to be somewhat confusing. I think the stormwater initiative as a whole needs to continue to be a priority for the city. I guess I would just like to better understand each one of these options and what it is really that we're trying to get out of them. And I'm just not feeling like we've been provided that answer.
Mr. Hamilton?
So regarding I already said my piece on number 1. Number 5, I think, it's hard to know what we don't know. We need to, it sounds like we just need to keep our ears open and let all the players know that if there is a county initiative that comes forward, that we would be interested in hearing about it and potentially participating, but not knowing what it is, we can't commit to anything. As I'm sure no other city would, without knowing what it's going to be. Or maybe it's going to be a similar tax, but at a county tax. That would end up with a much larger pool of money that would need to be split up among all the cities, and who knows what our portion of that would be. It's really hard to tell what that would be, but I think we need to we keep our ears and eyes open on that one. For number three, yeah, I think we need to pursue that. Do I think we need to drop everything this month and push forward with it? No. And the city manager said the same thing, but it is something that we're going to need to focus on in the nearer term, because the Prop 218 process failed, and we need to fund stormwater. We can't, as everyone has said repeatedly tonight and for the last several months, we can't continue this way, and we have to address it.
Okay, so I'll summarize in that Mr. Salazar would like to proceed on 3. I've heard Vice Mayor would like to wait until possibly October. I've heard from Mr. Hamilton, I believe, want to proceed with 3, keeping it at the line. Linda, I know you were, Councilmember Mason, you were talking about just not knowing, I don't know that there's any regional efforts yet, but I don't want us to turn away if there an opportunity or option opens. For me, I believe that we need to, this is something that we have to take care of. We have to move on. And so we need to give staff that kind of direction to do that. It is important. I see that the city manager has his hand up.
Sure. Let me attempt to plow a way forward. Starting from the bottom, with regard to number 5, there have been preliminary conversations about a regional effort. Councilmember Hamilton is exactly right. We do not know exactly what that will be. We do not know when that will materialize. We will certainly return to the city council with any information that develops and provide clarity at that time. This was really an effort to let council know that there may be a regional effort. There's been a countywide stormwater, sea level rise, and resiliency agency created. They're looking at regional projects. They're talking about finding a permanent funding source for the agency, and there may be funds that could support the city of San Bruno. What I mentioned is typically these regional efforts do not fund all of the local infrastructure. They fund strategic grants, one of which may be in San Bruno, right? But my professional assessment is that number 5 is not mutually exclusive to proceeding with other options to fund our local infrastructure. And so of the options that we talked about to look at additional ways to fund our local interests, our local infrastructure, was to possibly consider a general obligation bond, and we would prepare all that information and provide the city council with the full complement of analysis that you need to make that final decision. We're not there yet. We're simply talking about possible avenues to go down, and so we can't advise on the work until we do the work. But I understand that there's a reluctance to say potentially even go down that avenue. And so what I want to proffer is that your strategic initiatives were funded in the budget that was approved on June 22nd. And so we are 16 days into the budget cycle, 13 days into the budget cycle for those initiatives. I've committed to the city council to come to you with quarterly updates. And on the tickler file that you guys have seen, there is a meeting at the August 27th meeting where I want to come and give you guys an update on your funded initiatives, where things fit, and give you a status update. Why don't we talk about this then? When we're talking about the full complement of strategic initiatives. With regard to number one, I think what I've heard is a majority of the city council say, put together information on what it would take to analyze the ballot responses, to provide some information on the demographic analysis. And, you know, we're not saying yes now, but we'll, when staff comes back with what the scope of work would be, estimated costs, we'll make the decision at that time. I think that
is what I have heard by more than a majority, at least a 4-1, yes, correct. Same on the number 5. The 3 is what you may want to just clarify for us. I mean, you already did. Please don't. You have clarified it. But my understanding is that we had a majority of the council that wished to proceed with 3. And I can be corrected. I know Councilmember Mason has her hand up.
Count, yes. Mayor Medina, I would just sort of clarify that I think a majority of the council has said not proceed with number 3, but do the preliminary work to articulate to the city council what would be involved in a potential general obligation bond or parcel tax. But I wouldn't want the public to walk away tonight that the council has made the decision. It is simply to begin looking at that avenue.
You're correct. That was my understanding as well. It was just because, as you said too, we need to know we have next November. Your concern to us is you can't just keep waiting, you know, and then we have a short window with the other elements that are put on us. Councilmember Mason and Vice Mayor Medina.
Thank you, City Manager Grogan, for that clarification. So I'll just so I would support 1 to 3 and 5, and I just would also reiterate and look, or not reiterate, but just say that when we're looking at the possibilities, also consider other public entities and what they're looking at, whether they're looking at potential taxes or any other measures as well, so that we're not competing with each other. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to be clear that when our city manager said it, we'll return to this and it would need to be done by October, that was absolutely fine. That was my main point. Like tonight, we're not saying, yes, we're going to pursue it, that we're going to make that decision. And with the clarity provided by the city manager that the staff will be doing some of that work and we're going to get updates on other things. So I'm fine with this moving forward in that direction.
Mayor Medina, you're on mute.
That doesn't help. I was saying, City Manager, thank you. City Manager, do you feel that it's solidified as to the direction from council for staff?
Yes, we will continue to participate in conversations about a potential regional effort. We will return to the city council with a scope of work and estimated cost and timing for a demographic analysis of the prior 218 effort. And we will continue talk about funding mechanisms, potentially a general obligation bond or a parcel tax when we talk about and receive an update on our strategic initiatives, because this effort really would be a significant one and need to be dovetailed with other potential ballot initiatives.
Okay, thank you.